Hello, this is Mr. Stewart bringing you the feedback for the 3.4 quiz, which is covering multiplicative inverse. So let's just get started with the quiz. Okay. Question number 1 reads, write the word sentence as an equation and then solve. This is a this is a multiple choice question, and the sentence reads, a number divided by -4 is -13. So there's a few key phrases you need to understand. When it's just referring to a number, excuse me, just referring to just a number, that's your unknown. Divided by is just an operation that you can show. A number being divided by something else, and I'll talk to you about that. And then it says -4, which is part of the equation, is a fancy way of saying is equal to, right? 3 is 3. Well, it's the same as saying 3 is equal to 3, and is equal to 13, or -13. Okay. So if I say a number divided by -4, so let's say if I were to write something like this, a number divided by 5, a number divided by 5, I would write this as a fraction where that number is over, where the unknown, the variable, is over the number. So this number is divided by 5. That means how many times can 5 go into that number? This number is being split evenly into 5 equal groups. It's being divided by 5. So you need to understand, if you understand that order, everything else should fall into place. Now there are 3 up here that look like they could be the correct solution. The only question now is which one of these ends makes this equation true. Several things you could do. You may choose to substitute this number in for the original, the solution in for the original equation, to see if it actually ends up being true, and the one that it gives you the correct solution, where the left is equal to -13, then that might work. Or you may choose to just solve this on your own. So if you've got a number being divided by another number, I'll make one up, and that's supposed to be equal to something, right? The idea is to solve for the variable. The variable is the n. We want to isolate the variable by applying the inverse operation. In this case, in fact, all of this chapter, the inverse operation is specifically referring to the multiplicative inverse. So if a number is being divided by 3, the inverse of that would be multiply by 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -3. Notice how I didn't change the sign here, because we're not referring to the additive inverse. We're not trying to take the opposite of 3. We're trying to take the opposite of the operation, and the operation that's happening is division. It's being divided by -3, so we're going to cancel this out by multiplying both sides by -3. This is going to cancel out and leave me with 1. And I've isolated the variable, and that's equal to whatever 12 multiplied by, -12 multiplied by a -3 is. -12 multiplied by a -3 is going to be a positive 36. So in this case, my n would be equal to 36. You'd have to solve for yours to make sure you have the correct solution, but hopefully this is helpful for you. Okay. Looking just at question number 2 here. The question reads, match the equation with the first step to solve it. Match the equation with the first step to solve it. What operation would be required to isolate the variable? Here's the equation. 3 times n is equal to -13. So you got to think about this. What operation would be required to isolate the variable? What is the first step in order to solve for this equation? you're actually going to take a look at this and think, okay, what operation is actually happening here? You should identify that this is multiplication that's happening. 3 is being multiplied by n. Whenever you have a number, sorry about that. Whenever you have a number next to a letter, what is happening here is multiplication. That's important to understand. This is multiplication. So this is multiplication. And in order to isolate the variable, in order to isolate the variable, you want to apply the inverse operation of multiplication. And so that's important to understand. And that should probably help you get to the correct solution. Question number 3 reads, solve the equation and check your solution. Now we changed these. These questions used to be multiple choice, but I didn't like multiple choice questions on these because it didn't require students to solve using the inverse operation. Students just could take all of the answers and plug them in and see which one was true, and they never taught themselves how to isolate the variable using inverse operation. I'll make up one of my own. Negative 4t is equal to, say, negative 12. Now, the operation that is happening here between the t and the number. So I've got two sides of an equation. This is the side I'm working with because this is the side that has the variable. And so what operation is happening between the t, the variable, and the coefficient? That's multiplication. So in order to isolate the variable, I'm going to apply the inverse operation of multiplication. And what is the inverse operation of multiplication? It's division. So right here, I'm going to show a division. Okay. In fact, I may even write it like this. I may even do this. A negative 4t divided by, divided by a negative 4. Notice what I did here. I'm dividing this entire thing by a negative 4, not a positive 4. Because if I divided by a positive 4, a positive divided by a negative would give me a negative, and that wouldn't leave t alone. That would be t with a negative number. We don't want that. We need t to be 100% by itself, isolated. So whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So to keep it balanced, this side also needs to be divided by a negative 4. Now that I've done that, I can cancel these out. A negative 4 divided by itself goes to 1. So I'm left with 1t here, which means it's by itself. And that isolated variable should be balanced with whatever is on this side of the equation. And a negative 12 divided by a negative 4 is going to be a positive 3. This is mine. This is my solution. It's not your solution. Okay? And this is asking us to write the answer in the box as a number. So don't spell it out. Write the actual answers. Just write the number. No spaces, nothing. Just write the number right here and hit enter. Okay. Here's another one. And the equation, so it says solve the equation and check your solution again. Oh, and we didn't check our solution in the last one, but maybe I'll show you how to check your solution in this one, just so you know if it's true. So we've got a negative 6/10 p, so a 6/10 of a p, is equal to a negative 16 8/10. So this is probably one of those that you probably just couldn't do in your head. Some people might, but I wouldn't be able to. So let me make something up. I'm going to do negative 15.2 is equal to a negative 0 7/10 p. Okay, so this is my made-up one, just to kind of show you how I'd approach this. And you might apply the same process. This number right here is being multiplied to p. this is an entire term right here. You got to understand, this is an entire negative 7/10. So the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I'm going to take this and divide the entire thing by a negative 0 and 7/10. But whatever I do to one side, I have to keep the equation balanced by doing the same thing to the other side of the equation. And so this is nice. This will cancel out and go to 1. And at this point, over on the left-hand side, I can solve by hand if I want to, but I'd just like to save myself some time. So I'm going to do a negative 15 and 2/10 divided by a negative 7/10. And this gives me a crazy big solution that is something like 21 and 7. Let me just round. I'll just round to the nearest 1,000th. So this is my solution. So that means that T, which is now P, which is now isolated, is going to be equal to this. Well, approximately this. It looks like I may have ran into a repeating decimal here. But that's okay. If you ever run into a repeating decimal, just round to the nearest 1,000th and just call it close enough. Now, to be able to check for this, to see if this is actually true, I can actually take my original equation and substitute this solution back in for where the variable used to be. It used to say P. Now I'm going to put 21 and 714 1,000ths. Sorry, that doesn't look like a 21 there. I'm going to change that so it looks very much like a 21. Okay. And all I do is apply the operation here, multiply that by a negative 7/10, and this gives me, it spits out a negative 15 and 2/10. So that equals negative 15 and 2/10. Or, you know, if I had to approximate, it's approximately equal to negative 15 and 2/10. So if my solution gives me my original equation and it checks out as true, then the equation is true. So in algebra, you don't have to guess and hope that your answer is right. You can plug it back into your original equation and see if what you got for the solution, whatever you got for the solution here, plug it back in and see if it does actually spit back a negative 16 and 8/10. Okay. The last question. So let me make one up. So first of all, it reads, solve the variable, check your solution, write your answer in the box as a number. Here's the equation, n divided by 4. Don't forget that fractions are just a form of division. This is literally saying n divided by 4 is equal to a negative 13. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to see, but here we go. So I'm going to make mine up. N divided by 3 is equal to a negative 15. Let's say 15, okay? So this is division. We've already identified this is division. Never forget that every fraction can be written as a division. N over 3 is the same as n divided by 3. And I want to get n by itself. I want to isolate the variable. In order to isolate the variable, I need to apply the inverse operation. The inverse operation of division is multiplication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this entire quantity by a positive 3. This is a positive 3, so I'm going to multiply everything by a positive 3. But whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to also multiply this entire quantity by a positive 3. Now, I just think, what is 15 times 3? Well, first of all, let me start over here on the left side. 3 divided by 3 is going to go to 1. So these go away. That goes to 1. So I've left with 1n, which is the same as just an n. So n is now isolated, and we can bring that down. Now I think, what's a negative 15 times 3? That's 15, 30, 45, and a negative times a positive is always going to be a negative. So negative 45. This is my solution. I can test this by plugging it back in. So let me rewrite the equation, but this time, instead of putting n, I'm actually going to put the solution, which I got to be negative 45. So I think, what is negative 45 divided by 3? If this gives me the solution as negative 15, then negative 45 is my correct solution. No need to guess. I can just check. I do negative 45 divided by 3, and I get negative 15. And so that checks out. A negative 15 is the same as a negative 15. Okay. So equations are nice because they help us solve for real-world examples. They're also nice because you never have to guess. If you ever get a solution, you can check your solution to see if it is accurate. Okay. Just remember to isolate the variable by applying the inverse operation. Keep the equation balanced to both sides, and then check your solution by substituting. Hopefully this is helpful. Have a good day.